Explain to
My
us
pleasure.
how somebody gets good at what you got good at here.
I get asked that question a lot, and it comes down to practice. You can train that body of yours to do really anything it wants to do if with practice. I call that training, and that's what I've done for the last 8 years with this plank pose. And every time I did it, I got progressively better at it. So I knew I was doing something right, and I wanted to retire that pose with this last Guinness World Record that we set for the pose, and I did, and I put it behind me. And like you said, I want to move into the push-up genre, and let the plank supplement that particular endeavor as opposed to the push-up supplementing the training I did for the plank pose.
He's already tired of the plank questions. He's moved on to other things. He's an ex-Marine and he's off to the next mission. But I do have questions. So about 4 minutes in on the record, were you like, oh my God, this is going to be harder than I thought? Like where like 4 or 5 minutes in where you're like, oh, this is going to be a long 8 hours.
That's the scariest part is when I get up on that platform, and you'll see, if you look at some of the footage, you'll see some of the apprehension perhaps as I walk up there with my coach who actually flew in here to be here. She's from Australia, and she was good. And, she knew, all I had to do was show up, and I did. And I walk up there, and right when I get on that platform, I know then that I have to do what I've trained to do. I'm in familiar territory, so there's no really need to be scared, but nervous, of course. But those first few minutes when you're down, you take a look out at the crowd, you get a feel for what's going on. It takes about an hour or so for me to get used to the mat and the mat to get used to me. And it's a meet and greet kind of thing that we do, an exchange that I have up there. And then I settle into my thing and eventually totally just lose track of the entire day, the time, and just get lost in my own fantasy of rock and roll,
George, so what happens? You're planking and you're trying to break the world record and you're doing this for hours. So what happens when George Hood has to go to the bathroom?
If you look at the clips, you'll figure it out. I'd go like everybody else does. I get asked that question a lot, but the body has to hydrate. I have to take on fluids to do that event or something of that duration without hydrating yourself and staying fueled with electrolytes, that's dangerous. And I experienced that in China back when I set the record at 4 hours, 1 minute. I knew then from this point on, taking on fluids,
Okay, so you're telling us you have a diaper of some sort. You're just peeing your pants is what you're saying.
Oh, what? Have I? Sure. What the hell? I mean, I go. I'm hooked up. I'm good to go. That's I get asked that question so many times, but I have to go, and so there's technology there to facilitate that.
What does your body end up feeling like the following day, or what is the worst of the pain, and what day does it arrive? Is it the next day, 2 days after?
No, it's that as soon as I drop my knees when we hit the goal time, dropping to my knees and sliding into the child's pose, we call it, to stretch out the lower back. That is the most painful. It's very difficult to get down because I feel it in my quads. The toes support. There's a lot of pressure on your toes to support the lower half of the body, and mostly that's the upper part of your legs. Those quads have got to be strong, and they get very sore, and that's probably the sorest part of the ordeal, is to get the blood flow back in those legs. But I felt that as soon as I would drop down, and it was over, that pain sets in. It goes deep because you're in a static pose. So just imagine that pain just kind of digging deeper into the tissue, into the muscle. The longer you stay there without moving to sustain you in the pose. And the next day, it lasts for about 48 hours. Very difficult to walk, but it's a total body soreness. And what I look for is that the soreness is equal on both sides of the body from head to toe. Then you did it right.
What is the closest, George, that you came to quitting? Like where along the path were you mentally tried the most?
My cognitive coach, Renee, Cobley was there by my side when it seemed like, I think it was hour 6. It seemed like hour 6 took forever to get there. It might have been hour 7, but I was in some dead space there, and I was calling for the time, wanting to know where I was at, and I wasn't where I thought I was. That's devastating. And so I remember looking at her, and I said, you know what? Based on the energy I'm feeling, what's happening here, let's just get to the 8:01 and pass the Guinness World Record, and let's set the new mark, because I said there's no need to go on here. I need to just be done as soon as possible. And I remember looking at her, and that's when you get these fleeting thoughts, you can't drop. You can't fail. You have to finish what you started. But do you get those fleeting thoughts? Absolutely. But you're surrounded by a team that loves you. You're surrounded by a crew that supports you, and they're not going to abandon you, no matter who's in the audience. Your crew is going to make sure you get to where you said you were going to get to, and that's very important to remember that.
George, how many times did you eat? What'd you eat during those 8 hours? How'd you eat during those 8 hours?
I don't eat. I go into the event pretty dry, pretty empty. I have a pre-event breakfast of sorts that I eat very early in the morning. My last full meal is about 12 to 13 hours before I get on that platform. We did that the night before. Once that's all purged, then that morning, about 4 hours before I get on the platform, I have usually one hard-boiled egg, a small bit of oatmeal, and I start hydrating. Lots of fluids, lots of water, lots of electrolytes. And then I go down there and I stay empty the whole time. But they're fueling me with electrolytes and water alternatively throughout the ordeal. And that's something the crew has to do.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.